again, I thank everyone for being with us today. And the title of today's talk, the theme that we're working with today, is the art of living. And I put art in all caps on the email. Capital A, capital R, capital T, to emphasize that is the most important idea of what we're talking about today. Art, the art of living. Now, we want to start out by kind of giving the juxtaposition between art and science, or art and process and procedure and those kind of things. There's a time and a place for both, but we need to understand the difference, and we need to not get stuck too much in one or the other. So this idea of art, it involves this connotation of creativity. There's a certain amount of flexibility in art. There's a certain amount of uniqueness in the art that we create. Dr. Holmes gives us the example of an artist who goes down to the beach and sets up an easel. And when you've been to the beach, I'm sure you've seen this. Artists go down and they set up their canvas on their easel, and they start painting. Sometimes there's a class or a group, and there's maybe 3 or 4 of them all there, and the onlookers come by strolling down the beach, and they look at each canvas to see what each artist is creating, and then look out at the seascape that the artist is looking at. And the amazing thing is that if you look at each canvas, each is different. Each artist is looking out at the same beach, the same ocean, the same children playing in the sand, the same umbrellas, the same beach chairs, same piers, same little boats on the horizon, all the same things, but each one has a different expression of that on their canvas. So Dr. Holmes tells us we might be painting this seascape, and we might decide, I want to put a little seagull over here, and we take our brush and we make sort of a V, and the eye interprets that, the brain interprets what the eye sees. That's a seagull. Or maybe we want to put a flock of pelicans. The pelicans just kind of float along over the waves. They're so close to the water that when a breaker comes in, they kind of go up and down. They roll up and down slightly with them. It's almost like the pelicans in the ocean are one, and they're just separated by inches of water. Or maybe you want to put a dolphin or porpoise in your painting, jumping up out of the water, And each artist will look at that scene and create something different. And we have to say to ourselves, well, why is that? If I went down there with 5 cameras and I gave everybody a camera and said, look this direction, press the shutter, all 5 of those pictures would be essentially the same. But when I give the artist a canvas and a brush and a palette, each one creates something different. This is art. This is the difference between art and something that is mass-produced, or something that is produced using rigid process, rigid procedures. There's a certain amount of expression here. There's something within the artist. What Dr. Holmes tells us is that the beauty is already a feeling within the artist. It is already a feeling, right? Not an intellectual idea, but a feeling. The artist feels beauty, and the artist looks out at the scene, and this feeling of beauty that is already within them resonates with something in the scene, whether it is really there or whether it is only there in their heart, in their inspiration, right? To come in, it's coming in from the Father, inspiration, enthusiasm, to come in from the divine. And each one feels that beauty in a different way. And each one recognizes what they feel in a different way. And each one expresses it through their brush strokes, through the choice of colors, through the positioning of the objects, through the composition of the painting. Each one then looks at this same, for all practical purposes, this same scene, but each one creates something unique and something beautiful. This is art. This is what we're talking about with art. And the difference between that and what we're used to is in processes and procedures. I want you to think about a franchise fast food restaurant. You know, the idea with the franchise fast food restaurants when they started was you could go anywhere in the country, and now you can go anywhere in the world. And if you go to that same franchise, you will recognize the food that you would get. You'll get the same hamburger in California that you get in London, for example. That's the idea. And the way that they do that is through rigid procedures. You know, there's a certain procedure that each restaurant must follow, and each cook must follow, and everybody has to do things exactly the same way at each and every one of these restaurants all over the world. And the result is that you may get a consistent meal, but they're all kind of mediocre. You'll never get a fantastic one. Not usually. Maybe it's happened, but I don't think if you ever said to somebody, "Tell me about the best hamburger you ever had in your life," that they would say, "Oh, I had it at a big franchise." In a similar fashion, if you ask them, "Well, tell me about the worst you ever had," not likely that it's going to be at a place that uses strict controls. So in the interest of efficiency, in the interest of effectiveness in terms of delivering consistency, what has happened is the art has gone out of the cooking. There's no personal touch. There's no variation. There's no flair. You know, there's just a patty and a bun and a sauce and lettuce and tomatoes and onions, and that's it. That's it. So I want you to keep that image in mind, you know, because this is your life. This is your life. And is your life a work of art? Or have you been following instructions for consistency, for mediocrity that the world has been given to us? Which would you prefer? I'll give you just one more example. You know, I started working on computers back in the 60s, mainframe computers that did accounting for businesses. And I was there when computers started to become things that entered the home. For the first ones that we built, we built ourselves with soldering irons and piece parts to very early on, before the Radio Shack computers started to come out. We had computers. And this is before the internet. So the computer stores started popping up, you know, get your home computer. And I would go in and check out what was on sale. And people would come in, families would come in and say to the salesman, "Well, what can I do with this?" You know, and the salesman, of course, this is absolutely wonderful and you have to have it. But the people would say, "Well, what can I do with this? What is it that we can do with this?" You know, and it came down to very simple applications. You could do word processing. You could do spreadsheets. You could build a little database to put your recipe cards on. And for the children, there was a drawing. So always some type of a drawing program. You know, you can use your crayons right here on the computer. You don't need a coloring book and crayons. You know, and that was it. There wasn't a whole lot. You know, and yet people were buying them. So people started to write little programs to do different things. They would experiment, much like you get a new app on your phone now. Somebody's trying something out. And several of them that came up were dealing with music. And the idea was that you could take a piece of sheet music, your favorite piece of sheet music, and you could open up this program and you could draw the notes on a musical staff that was within the program. You could position the notes. And you had different symbols for whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, etc. Rests, all the musical symbols that you're used to on the staff. And you would put that in, and you could select the voice of your instrument. So you could make it sound like a guitar, you could make it sound like an organ, things like that. And then you hit the play button, and the computer was going to read the music that you had notated into the program, and it was going to play the piece back to you. That was the idea that people were experimenting with. And it never sounded right. It never sounded exactly right. Now, I found that very interesting, you see, because the computer was playing the notes to the exact pitch and to the exact duration and at the exact tempo that we had selected when we entered them into the program. But it didn't sound right. There was something missing. It was too mechanical. It was too regular. And if you stop and think about real music, live music, when musicians are creating music, there's an art to that, you see. There's a variation. There is something that the musician feels. It's called the groove. If you want to have fun after the talk, go on YouTube and try to find the videos of musicians explaining the groove. The groove. What is the groove in music? People will talk about that. And some will say, well, it's a reaction that the audience has, a reaction that causes them to move. And the way that they move, well, that's the groove. You know, the music had a good groove. We wanted to dance to it. That's the groove. And other people will say, well, no. The groove is something the musician feels. And this causes the musician to move differently as they play the instrument and to insert slight variations into what they're playing. So they're playing the same notes at approximately the same times as excuse me, notated on the sheet music, but there's a very subtle difference. There's a very subtle difference. One note may be held just a little bit longer than it should. One note may be just a little bit shorter than it should. One note may be a little bit louder than the other. One may be a little bit softer than the other. One may come in just a little bit earlier, a little bit late. Syncopation, just off the beat. You know, just a little bit, just a swing. That's the swing music. Just swing it just a little bit, see? And there's something within the musician that intuitively knows how to do that. And perhaps no two will do it the same way, or perhaps there's something common to all of us who play instruments that we feel that something. We feel something. And the music comes out differently. There's an art involved. There's an art. It's not just a mechanized process. There's an art involved. So the reason that I give those examples is I would really like us to consider that living is an art. It's not a process, you know. So many things that we read about in psychology and in self-help and time management and productivity and all of these different things that sort of try to mechanize our lives, you know. They take the art out of it. They take the art out of it, you know. We can set our day planners and we can plan every second of every day from the time we awaken until the time we go back to bed. And we can have something to do at a certain time. And to get a good score on your day planner at the end of the day, you know, you have to spend your day doing the things on the list, you know. If you study psychology in school and they talk about what normal is, they're talking about what the median is. You know, if you interview 100 people and 75 people answer a question this way, whatever that way happens to be, well, that becomes the normal, you see. And then typically there's a bell curve and the answers will fall off to either side. And we've confused average with normal. See? We've confused average with normal. It takes the idea of the validity of the variance out of the picture. Just because one person is off one side or the other from the median doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. They're not broken. There's nothing that we need to fix. It just means they hear music from a different drummer. They're dancing to a different beat. So what we want to consider then is that life, our life, is our work of art. And what we are doing, what you and I are doing when we are creating this work of art is we are sensing, feeling, getting in tune with, getting in touch with that within us that already knows. Already knows the dance. It wants to dance as us, you see. Already knows the song it wants to sing as us. Already knows the painting it wants to paint as us. The book it wants to write as us. The movie it wants to make as us. The love it wants to express as us. It already knows that. And our role then is like the artist on the beach. Our role then is to choose, to select, to decide. Oh, I'll have this today. I'll have a seagull here today. I'll have a porpoise there tomorrow. I'll have a child playing with a beach ball the day after. It's a work of art. It's a work of art. So if we're going to consider that our lives are a work of art, and of course whose work of art, but it's our work of art. Nobody can paint our picture for us. Nobody can sing our song for us. Nobody can dance our dance for us. We're the only ones who can do that. So we want to talk a little bit about the difference between the way things are work, or the way things are thought of when we approach life from the point of view that that our body is a machine and our life is something that needs to be confined to a process for maximum effectiveness and efficiency, as opposed to the way that divine love creates, the way that divine love creates. So let's talk for a second just about the difference between inductive logic and deductive logic. Deductive logic. Remember the Sherlock Holmes stories when Watson would always be astounded that Holmes had figured something out. He'd say, Holmes, how did you do that? And Holmes would say, deduction, dear Watson, deduction. Deduction is starting from a known and then working your way outwards. Induction is an inquiry within. So if we take a clue and we start to work our way back to a cause, right, that is inductive reasoning, inductive logic. So we have a famous story, whether it is true or not, I don't know, but we have a famous story that Newton was sitting under the apple tree one day, and the apple fell from the tree and hit him on the head, and because of that, he discovered gravity. And of course, it's a disingenuous story, but it's a story that we remember. But you see, gravity already existed. Gravity already was. People knew that water flowed downhill. They knew that apples fell from trees. They knew all that stuff, but they didn't know exactly how it operated or why it operated. And Newton didn't answer the question of why. He just kind of gave us a how. That the objects seem to attract each other. And it's a variation of their mass and their distance. And an apple and a cannonball will fall at the same exact rate. So he was inquiring back into this thing called gravity, and he was trying to understand, can I explain exactly how fast the apple falls without addressing the bigger question of why? Now, if you look at things from the point of view of from gravity's point of view, if gravity had a point of view, it's just very simple. It's just very simple. It's a given that once the object is released, it'll be attracted to the other object. That's all there is to it. So if you and I are walking down the street, and we see that a heavy object has fallen from a building and it has hit a car, we don't have to go into any great line of reasoning to understand that somehow whatever that is got loose up there and it fell. It fell because gravity is always gravity. So what we tend to do when we are working with our intellect is we tend to reason inductively, and we tend to use logic. We tend to use logic, but not just any logic, a logic that we got from the Greeks. We tend to use logic. So we're always trying to figure things out, is the best way that I can put it. And we're trying to figure it out with a system of logic that is in itself incomplete. It is flawed. The system of logic that we use does not explain the world as it works. And here's the reason why. The system of logic that we have generally inherited tells us that a thing is either true or it is false. It is one or the other. It is a binary world. It is or it is not. But there's an older system of logic that comes to us from India, and it tells us that a thing might be true, it might be false. It might be both true and false, or it might be neither true nor false. Now, to our Western-trained minds, we would look at that. We would say, well, that's absurd. That's ridiculous. You know, it is or it isn't. It can't be both at the same time or neither at the same time. However, when we start to get into the world of quantum mechanics, which by the way, the Zoom group is going to go into in 2 to 3 weeks' time, we're going to go into the physics of God. But when you start to get into the ideas that are presented to us in quantum mechanics, we find that the Indian system of logic more accurately describes the way the world works at the quantum level. The particle may be, or it may not be, or it may both be and not be at the same time. And I'm not pretending to understand to say that I understand how that happens. But if you listen to the explanations of quantum physics, the idea of the Indian logic is more accurate than the idea of the Greek logic. So my point is that when we are working with the intellect, when we are working inductively, and when we are working with the system of logic that we have grown up with, we are starting from the outside and trying to work our way back in, and we're trying to work our way back in with a system of thought that is in itself incomplete. We just need to remember that. This is why we're always trying to figure things out. We're always trying to figure things out. And the very best, if you stop and consider that, the very best that we can do is we might come to an explanation that satisfies us. But that may not be the only explanation, and it may not be the best explanation. So sometimes we'll try to figure something out. We'll be figuring it, thinking about it, wondering about it, and then finally we say, oh, well, that must be it. And we'll satisfy our curiosity, and we'll go off to something else. And then maybe years later we'll find out that our big aha moment, oh, that must be it. Well, it wasn't true at all. It just kind of, I think that sometimes our mind gets tired and it just gives us an answer, so we'll go away. Here, take this answer. Just leave this alone now. Just go away. But the divine mind doesn't have to inquire. See, the divine mind already knows. It is omniscience. It is omniscience. It already knows. It doesn't have to figure it out. It doesn't need logic and reason. It is. It already is. So we will sit here and say, well, why does the apple fall from the tree? And the divine mind already knows why the apple falls from the tree. It doesn't have to use logic. It doesn't have to use reason. It just simply knows. So when we are creating in an artistic mode, when we are living our life as if it was a piece of art, when we are trying to create something, it doesn't even we might ratchet it down a little bit instead of saying, well, not on the grand scale of my life, but even if I'm just trying to to create something or invent something or write a speech or submit an essay to school or anything like that. Anything that we recognize that we are going into a creative mode for. Instead of trying to fight our way to it through logic and reason, knowing that the logic and reason we use are incomplete, starting from a place of not knowing and trying to figure our way back, what we want to do is we want to get in touch with that part that already knows, right? So this part that already knows, the spiritual part, the soul part, the divine part. There's part that already knows. And then there's the part that wants to know. There's the part that wants to know. Remember, I know I've said this a million times before, but I want you to think of the symbols of the chakra system that we get from the Buddhist. We've got 3 chakras below the heart, and then we have the heart. And the heart is represented by 2 triangles, one pointing up and one pointing down, and they overlay each other and they make a 6-point star. And it is not until we start to function at the level of the heart that the human and the divine parts of us can begin to fully interact. When we're working from the lower 3 chakras, we're working from intellect, we're working from logic, we're working from reason. There's a certain amount of instinct in there for survival and procreation and all of those things. But it is when we start to get in touch with the heart that we can start to access the throat chakra as self-expression. And this is what I'm talking about, creating the life that gives expression to what you are, to how you choose to express this life. And then the third eye represents intuition. And of course the crown chakra is our experience of unity, our mystical experience of oneness. So what we want to do when we are going about something that we are creating is to try to put aside the process and the procedure and all of the things that we have been taught. And we want to get in touch with the intuition that already knows. Einstein said his greatest discoveries came not from logic and reason, but from imagination. At least that's what the meme on the internet says he said. Tesla, and by the way, they asked, so allegedly someone asked Einstein how it felt to be the smartest man alive, and Einstein said, "I don't know, you're going to have to go ask Tesla." Tesla thought his inventions were a revelation, that in their entirety these magnificent ideas just presented themselves to him in incompleteness. Not incomplete, but in completeness. They were complete when they were presented to him. The creative people that you will talk to in your life, in ancient Greece, they talked about the muses, the inspiration. There's something that moves upon the person who allows themselves to be put into a creative mode. There's something that inspires them. There's something that whispers in their ear or whispers in their heart, or however our intuition talks to us, which each of us may experience our intuition in a different way. But it's recognized in culture that these ideas come to us from someplace else. Or they seem to at least come to us from someplace else. And what our job is when we are creating is to set our intention. Remember last week we talked about paying attention to your intentions. We have to set our intention as to what it is that we want. And then we have to listen. Then we have to listen for it. That's what we're doing. So imagine the artist going to the beach in the morning with packing up the station wagon with the easel and the paints and the canvas and the brushes and the sunscreen. We've got to have the sunscreen and the sun hat and all of those things. But she starts her day with a prayer. Sweet Lord, let me feel the beauty today. Let me feel the love today. Let me feel the joy today. Let your hand guide me as I capture this feeling on my canvas. It's just a totally different approach to our day than I'm going to get up in the morning and see what's in my day planner. Now, I'm not saying you don't do the things that are in your day planner, but you start your day by opening your heart to inspiration. Lori likes to watch the painting shows on TV, Bob Ross and others. And one time they had a video a parent sent in of a little boy who was like 5 years old. And he had watched the show and he had mimicked the technique. So they would give him a little canvas and he would very quickly, within a few minutes, he would paint whatever that landscape was that Bob Ross had demonstrated in the show. And he could do it over and over and over again, do the same painting over and over and over again. In just a couple of minutes, give him a canvas, he'd be done. Give him a canvas, he'd do another, he'd be done. So he had the technique down, you see. He understood how to create a replica of that one scene that he had witnessed on TV. But it didn't appear that there was anything artistic going on there. He was mimicking behavior instead of feeling it himself. I don't know that. That's just what I surmised from looking at it. That's how it impressed me. So I think what we want to keep in mind is that as we learn about life, as we go to school and as we learn about life, as our parents raise us and they teach us about life, as we read books, as we get self-help and motivational books and all these kind of things, and as we start to try to figure out, how do I do this thing called life? Most of those works are simply teaching us how to mimic something, how to just do a technique. There was, in fact, in the 90s, I don't know, it may have been older than that, but there was, in fact, a technique where people were going around and teaching a technique of how to mimic. And the idea was, find somebody who's successful, mimic their behavior, and you will have their success as well. And there's workshops and seminars, and you can fly halfway across the country and go to a weekend retreat and pay thousands of dollars to be told, find somebody to mimic. And there's a problem with that. See, what we really want to do is we want to become the kind of person who can create the way they created and not just mimic their creation. And when I was learning how to fly out in Fremont, California, there used to be a little glider port there in Baylands. There was a drag strip and a glider port, and they're both gone now. And it's now the Tesla factory. It used to be, I think it was a Toyota factory back when I was there. But it was very near the end of the runway. And it was kind of a landmark. You could be far away from the field and you could look down and see the bay and you could see that building and you would know right away that was where you were going to go. And the first couple flights you take are orientation flights. There's an instructor with you, and the instructor not only makes sure that you know how to fly the plane, but that you know the things that are unique to that particular field, where the power wires are, where other airports are. San Jose Airport was right across the bay. So you look for traffic and planes and all those kind of things. And as we were coming into land, he was kind of talking me through my approach, and he says, "No, go over that factory there, and then make your turn crosswind to come in." And I said to him, "Now, is this over the factory? Is that where I'm going to turn all the time?" He said, "No, that's where you're going to turn today." He said, "The next time you fly, you need to figure out which way the wind is blowing, how fast the air is rising or sinking, how much altitude you have to make it back to the field, and you are going to set up your pattern based on the conditions as they exist at that time. He says, I never, ever want you to try to mimic a pattern. You may be making a great mistake. So I think we want to keep that in mind as we go through life, is that much of the practical advice that we get from others is not recognizing the creativity of our own soul, not recognizing the fact that there's a part of us that already knows, but rather trying to get us to mimic something that has worked for somebody else. So we have to understand the true relationship between will, volition, willpower, and trust. And here's where we're going to go with that. The purpose of the will is to choose, not to force something to happen. Right? A lot of things that you read are talking about, scrunch up your eyes and whip yourself up into a frenzy and use your willpower to make things happen and those kind of things that you've seen. I know you've all seen or attended workshops or things like that that seems to be their modus operandi. That's not the purpose of the will. The purpose of the will is to choose. What shall we have today? What shall we do today? What is it that I wish to have happen now? That is the purpose of will and volition and freedom of choice. It is to choose. That's why I said last week, you have to choose. You have to pay attention to your intentions. And if you're not paying attention to your intentions, you are choosing the mediocrity of race consciousness. You are choosing the same bland hamburger over and over and over again. So our purpose then is to choose and not to try to force things to happen, not to try to work ourselves up into a knot and just be so focused that we are trying somehow to make things occur by our will. And I will tell you that works. You can do that. But the minute your interest goes someplace else, the minute you take the force of your will away from the situation, it collapses. It collapses. It goes away. It takes that energy. It takes that force to sustain it. The example I use there is the Berlin Wall coming down. To me it seemed inevitable because it just took so much energy to keep things boxed in. That sooner or later the system was going to run out of energy to hold that in. So we're not talking about trying to force things to happen with the will, paying attention to everything, following up on everything, hurting everybody back, make sure everybody's coming back, doing the things we want. And sometimes in business, as managers or supervisors, that may be what has to be done. But I'm talking about your life. I'm talking about creating your life as a work of art. You have to choose what it is that you wish to have happen. You have to feel it. And Dr. Holmes says that in treatment, words are good, but if the words don't have feeling, they're not going to be as effective as if we felt it. Can you really feel it? Can you feel the love that you wish to have come through your life? Can you feel the joy that you wish to have come through your life? Can you feel the beauty? Just like the artist on the beach, those things are already within us. And what we are doing is we are invoking the way that mind works in order for those things to find an outlet through us, as us. Emerson says, we are already inlets who may become outlets of the divine. And the way that we may become it is by choosing. And then we come into this topic of belief and faith and surrender. So what Dr. Holmes tells us is that faith is a believing so certain that the idea to the opposite cannot enter the picture. So in our culture, we use the word belief more as an opinion. You know, do you think the Mets will win the World Series? Well, I believe so. I believe so. Well, we don't know. You know, we don't know. You never know who's going to win the World Series. But that's my opinion. That's my hope. That's my wish. That's my will. Right? And that's okay as far as it goes. But that's not good enough. See, that's not good enough to set the law into motion on a definite course for what it is that you wish to have happen. If you wish to experience love in your life, you must absolutely know that love exists. You must absolutely understand that the means of expressing love as you already exist. You may not see them yet. You may not exactly know this minute where and when and how, but you must believe that beyond a shadow of a doubt, you must know that love exists, and you must know that that includes you. This is faith. This is not believing in something that doesn't exist just because it makes us feel good. This is bringing ourselves to an understanding that God already is. God is love. God has created me out of itself. Therefore, love is my very nature. Therefore, love is my very nature. Now, that is deductive logic to a degree, but it takes us back to the beginning, and we're starting at the beginning that says, if love already is and I am a part of love, then the perfect way to express love in my life already exists, and I wish to let it create through me today. Or joy, or beauty, or peace. All of these different things that we wish to have come through us. This is our intention. And then we activate our intention with our faith. A belief so certain that any idea to the opposite cannot enter our minds. You have faith in gravity. You do. You have absolute faith in gravity. Absolutely. You did not get up this morning and wonder if gravity was still working today. You did not wake up this morning and hold on to the bed to keep from floating off because you weren't quite certain whether gravity was working today. The thought, the idea that gravity would not be working today never entered your mind. Never. Perfect faith. Perfect faith in gravity. Once we know what our intention is, and once we decide to work deductively from the fact that it already exists to let it out picture in our lives, once we declare that whatever we need to know is now revealing itself to us, then we just have to listen to our intuition. We have to listen to our inspiration. Like the artist on the beach that says, ooh, I think I'll put a seagull here. What are the little inspirations? What are the little things that flash into your mind? What are the little things that kind of speak to your heart? And then, of course, you must follow them. You must treat and you must move your feet. And what that requires, the last little bit in there, is a complete surrender. A complete surrender. A complete trust that there's a power in the universe that does respond to us according to our belief. You can call it the Holy Spirit, the doer of the word. You can call it the law of mind. You can call it whatever you want. But it's there. And we trust in it. And then we expect it to work, right? We expect it. We're not trying to force it to work. We're not trying to make it work. We're expecting it to work. We're looking for the evidence that it is working. It is happening. It is right now. Our life is a work of art. Now we kind of move as we move through life. You know, we think that life is a test. You see, life is something that we have to learn and we have to pass. We have to pass or fail. And the results of passing or failing are going to have an impact on us forever and ever and ever. And we try to master the techniques that we need in order to pass that test. This is kind of the mechanical approach to life, the procedural approach to life. Behave this way, don't behave that way, kind of things. Then we step into a mode where we start to say, no, see, there's more to life than that. I am here for more than that. It's about learning and about growing. It's about discovering my soul. It's about discovering my relationship with the divine. It's about being the artist who creates this life. What kind of life do I want to create today? See, and then we eventually move into the third level, the mystical level, which says, I'm not the artist. See? I'm the brush. I'm the instrument. There is an artist that knows how to create, that knows beauty, that knows peace, that knows love, and it wishes to use me as its instrument of these things, but it can't force me to be an instrument of those things. So I must choose. I must choose which of those things I will let come through me now. Right? We can do them all, but not at the same time. What am I going to let come through me now? And surrender to it. Let divine love have its way. I used to love to wake up with the John Fogerty song in my head. Put me in, coach. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play today. Put me in, coach. Divine love has created each and every one of us out of itself as an expression of its love, of its joy, of its peace, of its beauty. It has allowed us to come to the point of discovering that we must cooperate with it. It has given us enough insight into the techniques that we know how to do that. And now the question is, are we willing to do it? Do we want to go back to living life as if it was a method and a procedure and a process and something we need to follow, and we produce a piece of music that is mechanical like the computers used to do? Or do we want to feel? Do we want to feel the life and the love that is just bursting, trying to press through us? And do we want to let divine love show us the way today? I invite you this week, take some time this day, I invite you to consider your life as your masterpiece, as your work of art. What is it that you choose? What is it that you choose? What is your intention? Are you willing to put that intention clearly into the law? This is what I intend to have. Now I expect the intuition. I expect the inspiration. I expect the ideas to reveal themselves to me. And I don't have to force them to happen. I just expect them to happen, and I pay attention. I pay attention. And I think that's a key. A lot of times we go through all the other steps, and then these ideas come to us, and we say, oh, I'm busy right now. Go away. That's crazy. That's a ridiculous idea. Pay attention. Pay attention. Follow through. We have to trust that the divine love that brought us here knows how to do these things. That which created the universe out of nothing knows how to do these things. It wants to do these things. It just needs us as a cooperative co-creator. Join me this week in practicing the art of living. And so it is.